Hello, and welcome to another Churchyard Ramble. I'm Jeff Richards, and I'm one of the trustees of the Friends of St Nicholas Churchyard, and today I'm going to go on a ramble about, well, some historical research that has really sprung out of the acquisition of a new document. This is a document I think I showed you in the trailer last week. This is my Spage Register. So this is the Surrey Wills, the Archdeaconry Court, the Spage Register, and it's packed full of wills, and they mentioned some wills from Sutton, and specifically these are all really wills that are to do in that were all in the late 15th century, just tipping into the 16th century, but we're looking at the end of the medieval period. Now, I've referenced these wills before in previous rambles, but before I get on to that, I really, the point about today's ramble is that I'm going to try and build a family tree for Sutton. So I'm going to build a medieval family tree, and these videos that we're creating, these little rambles around the churchyard, and of course we can't meet in person still, really. It's still, I know that we could, but it would only really be groups of up to 6 people in the churchyard, including me, and I'm still not quite ready to do the risk assessments. And well, I've done the risk assessments. I still don't want to do this on a regular basis of booking people in to do that. So we're still having to meet. It's a historic time that we're living in, so we might as well make time for history, and these are brought to us really by the encouragement of Sutton Civic Society and Enjoy Sutton. We get a lot of support from Enjoy Sutton and Sutton Civic Society. If you don't know Enjoy Sutton, that's the grouping of businesses, that about 460 businesses that make up the High Street. They're all part of the Business Improvement District, doing fantastic work trying to make Sutton a great place to come and shop and have a wonderful social experience within the High Street area. And then you've got the Sutton Civic Society, a group of passionate individuals who are wanting to make Sutton make the right planning decisions, and so think of them as a critical friend. So if you're interested in getting involved, Sutton Civic Society is an ideal vehicle for that. Also, I'm touching on things like genealogical research. I'm touching on stuff like changes of the medieval period. I'll touch on manorial rights and properties and things like that. All these sort of historical themes are covered in the courses that are run by Carshalton College. So please do check out the history and culture classes at suttoncollege.ac.uk. Well, let's get started. I mentioned the Spage Register. I mentioned the idea of going back into the earliest times. Well, the person I want to start and focus on is somebody that I've spoken about in the past, because I went in to look at her will, and this is a lady called Alice Stewart. And I want to really emphasize here that we can suddenly go deep into history, and we can follow families within the late medieval period, and then into the early modern period as well. We'll see that we have some echoes in that, and some of the hints of what's happening. And it'd be really interesting from when I've finished at the end of this, if we're looking to share this on social media, to try and track down some of the families that may well still have echoes. Their names may still have echoes in the family groupings that we have in Sutton and around. Please be aware that names change, and subtle changes, and I'll mention that as well. So where do I start off with? Well, let's have a look. This is Mary. This is Alice's will. So I've shown you this in the past. This is a transcription of Mary's will, she names here loads of people. Now let's roll back to one of the earliest maps that we've got of Sutton. Show you this tiny little village. This is really a map at the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, showing the state of Sutton. It's tiny. It's got Lisson's in his survey of the environments of London in 1792 described the entire manor of Sutton, the area of Sutton and parish of Sutton, only having 100 dwellings. And we can use the stats of working out from the 1811 census, when we had about 638 people living in the parish of Sutton. We can roll that back and use the estimates on population growth to allow us to get back to a population size of Sutton of maybe only 155 to 160 people. And if you have a look down the lists of names just here mentioned by Alice in her will, you've got about 25 names. And if I cover the other wills that are mentioned here, like the Richard Hayton's will, John North's will, William Morland's will, and Richard Cook's will, suddenly we get to about, maybe we climb up to over 30 names. But in the context of that, if you have 5 people in the household, that's 30 names, 150 people. We're almost naming every family in the medieval village, and this is stretching from a period. These wills are looking at stretching from a period of 1483 to 1494. So this is only 11 years, and that means that you're looking at a really quite stable slice in history. Let's unpick this. I'm not interested in this ramble about the number of sheep that Alice left to her people, but Alice Stewart was a major player in this. It said in Lisson said that between 200 and 300 sheep in total ran up on the Dowsland of Sutton. So in terms of her representation and the number of sheep that she had, she was something of a big major player. Now I want to go back into this, looking at the list, and remind you of some of the things that we definitely know. So we know that she has a daughter called Emota, and Emota is married to Nicholas Brooke. So there's a relationship there, Nicholas and Emota Brooke. We know that there are other people. There are the Gilden family, or there's the Hitchcock family. The Alice Hitchcock is her niece. We've got the Stewart family itself, obviously, there, and so you've got her son. You know that there was Thomas Stewart, her husband, the father of John Stewart, and Richard Stewart, who is not of age, and so you've got her grandson, Richard Stewart, there, and that's going to be sort of important. You've got cascading sense of the generations. That's really interesting that we can now have that 3 listings of names. I got particularly excited about this because I know the listings of the names of the rectors or not the rectors, these are the parsons, the priests of Sutton, and if I actually look at the listing of the priests or parsons of Sutton, then in this period, in the late, really after 1483, then we're looking at people called Morland and Kellett, and and you've got William Morland. He resigned in 1488. He passed that on to William Kellett. The two are related. We can they aren't local, but they become local names. But the Kellett name is quite an interesting one. I'm going to come back to name derivations and some of the clues that we can get about where names come from and the migration around the country that come in. That takes place really. So William Morland, William Kellett were the priests during this period, but they also name, interestingly, in the will. Suddenly, we get another name to indicate that there were other priests in Sutton. Now, this is actually. You've got Rayner O'Dale, who is who's the chaplain of St. Nicholas. That's picking out the details from Alice Steward's will. And I mentioned that in the Surrey Wills book that there are in fact two versions of her will. One is obviously an earlier will, then better tuned to that, and Woodale or O'Dale is what the name of the priest is, and there's a later reference as well to a clerk in one of the wills to indicate that or a chaplain to indicate that there was probably a separately endowed chapel, probably the Lady Chapel, inside St. Nicholas. So there's suddenly a little bit more establishment, and the wills also give better indication that something that from the medieval period carried over. There was a sub-manor which managed to have distinct rights from the holding the Chertsey of the Abbot of Chertsey had of Sutton. Usually we just say, oh, the Abbot of Chertsey held Sutton. Yes, but from about 200 years before this, according to Lisson's, and I'm quoting here from Lisson's history of the environments of London, and in the section about Sutton, and it says there was formerly a manor in this parish distinct from that of the Abbot of Chertsey, valued in the reign of King John at 8 marks and then held by Gilbert Bassett. The manor, which was granted in the reign of Edward III by Sir Simon de Coddington to Richard Cook and William Hardingrey, or Hardergrey, and between them aliened to Sir Simon St. Michael, with the remainder to Ralph Coddington, was held under Chertsey Abbey. So that sense of something being distinct belonging to the Cook family carries through. So you've got the Steward family and Cook family indicate that there's some sort of household here as well, which may well be to do with the abbot's land, but somehow the servants of the abbot have managed to grab hold of some of the abbot's land and essentially running it. The families have taken it over, and these are all of peasant stock. They're not nobles. They're representing at this point the fag end of feudalism. We can actually start to sort of see the fag end of feudalism by in her will, Alice Stewart describes Richard Cook and Richard Cook as her fee-fee. And then there's another guy called John Buckley as well as a fee-fee. That means that she's having the land that she holds, which she may well hold in theory from the Abbot of Chertsey, but what she's doing is she's establishing it to say, well, actually now I'm assigning the land to somebody else who's going to hold it in trust for me. By assigning it to fees, you're basically creating a structure that the feudal owner of the land can't get hold of it, because the fees never die, because they just become the next person. It becomes a sort of a way of alienating this from the feudal right of the person to a cash right, where just simply there's no fees for the transfer of the land, because the land is never actually ever reassigned, because there's always somebody who is acting as the trustee. You're putting it into trust, essentially, and stopping the ability of the abbot to get more revenue from reallocating the land. And this is all a good structure, and you have to bear in mind that the clerks of this time in Sutton, William Morland and Kellett, were actually chancery lawyers, so they knew their stuff when it came to property. Anyway, stepping on, I want to hold these names, and one of the names I want to hold to you is this guy called William Plaistow. In here, in Alice's will, the property of there's a named piece of property called Gaddes, or Gaddes, Gaddes, which is assigned and seems to belong to one of the children of Alice Stewart, will actually get reassigned to somebody else 10 years later or 11 years later. And you'll notice that this chap here called Plaistow, William Plaistow, or Plaston, there's two versions of the will. Plaistow is only ever given one sheep. One sheep. Yay! So he's not a big player. He's not close to the Stewart family. As we go through, we see that there are other people in Sutton. These are much poorer people. They're not naming so many people in the wills, and in the case of Alice Stewart, she obviously felt that she needed to love bomb the entire village. But these people, this is Richard Hayton and Robert Hick, or Hawk, and how you pronounce the Hwick, it might well be Hwick, is the way in which named. They are, well, poor Richard Hayton is just buried in the churchyard, as is in 1685 another name that crops up. John North dies, and he leaves what remains of his small property, his holding, to William North, his father. It's when we come on to William Morland that it gets a little bit more interesting, because William Morland, who dies in 1492, and he had resigned his living in 1488, but has essentially retired to Sutton, and he had land. He had managed to acquire and get land out of the Abbot of Chertsey and out of the manorial holding. One of the things that I don't know whether I've done this ramble with you, but I know that William Morland, when he one of the first things he did when he became he was appointed parson of Sutton, was he took the Abbot of Chertsey to court to basically stop the abbot enclosing some of the land around Ben Hilton. So he may well have been able to extract some of the some more land in terms from the abbot. But here you've got names like William Kellett, who's described as his kinsman, coming from the parson of Sutton. You've got others, John Chapman and Philip, who are the servers. So they're not likely local to Sutton, and their belonging is transitory, because they'd be essentially in holy orders and they'd just disappear. what's more possibly interesting is you've got somebody like William Lewin, who is described in the will as a chaplain, and because he's described as a chaplain, he may well be a chaplain operating in Sutton within the either the Lady Chapel or because we saw that other chaplain of Sutton being described. But importantly, we've got these two other relatives of our William Morland, called Hugh and Henry. So Hugh is his kinsman, possibly a brother, and then Henry, the son, so his nephew. So he's looking after his family. Now, these people came to Sutton. William Morland came to Sutton during the Wars of the Roses, and he was part of the retinue of the Warwicks, the Neville family, who became, and Richard Neville became Warwick the Kingmaker. And if I just flick over and just talk about name origins, because I want to show you something now in origins of names. I'm going to show you this website. This is called yourfamilyhistory.com, and it's a useful thing because I can type in the name Morland, and what we see is a distribution on surname based on the 1841 census. Now, this is not the most sensitive mechanism to do it, but it gives us a sense of where the deep origin of the name came, and you can see that it comes from the deepest name origin is from in the context of Yorkshire, within the context of Lancashire, Westmoreland, and into Durham as well, and drifting up. But basically, you're in the north of England, and then there is a hotspot right down in the context of London and what is now the boroughs of London. So Morland is a northern name that came south. And if I do the same, looking at the distribution of the Kellet name, we can see as well that this is a northern name that came south as well. So it's very much a northern name, a similar distribution to the Morland name. That explains why they're kinsmen. But we don't see it being represented at all in London or Surrey or in Kent, where we might expect it, and this is because names change, I think I'm going to do this probably as a proper ramble separately, but Kellet, for example, as a name, transmogrifies from being Kellet to a name that we do recognise in the London Borough of Sutton, especially with Cheam history, Killick. Killick. And if I go and look at the distribution of the Killick name, we can see that in the Killick name, suddenly we find that it's much more of a hotspot in London, in Surrey, and into Kent. So this is very much a Kentish name that has drifted across into Surrey and Sussex. Well, if we actually we can go back and in the 1600s, I think it's the 1600s, it may be later than that, into the 1700s. And this is where I think I'll have to do a proper ramble distinctly on this. There's a lady who is baptized as a young child as Lettice. She's baptized as Lettice Kellet, and when she dies, she's changed into Letitia Killick. So you can see that names change within a single lifespan as people hear and think Kellet is not the name, Killick is the name, and so people get rebranded as well. And I think I've touched on that when I talked about the first African in Sutton called John Sango, where his name actually got hammered into the assumption that it was John Sango was hammered into being a Huguenot name, and that thing, and you see variations of spellings to indicate that that's the case. If I go back into what I was talking about, which was the wills, and building this family tree, so we know now we've got these people called Morland, all starting to form and form lives in Sutton. We look at the last will in this collection, which is the will of Richard Cook the Elder. Now, Richard Cook the Elder ties back to Alice Steward's will. So Alice Steward was the Fifi. What's interesting about this will, and I'm going to flick over now into the actual record that I've got of this. If I flick over this into Richard Cook's will, the thing that I want to bring out is that it is talking about in the codicil the rights to the manor of Sutton. So it says he talks about what happens to my son Richard Cook to relinquish all rights and said title to tenement of his son, his brother John. So Richard is the younger brother, John is the elder. So unless John dies, Richard then gets it. But to the rights to the manor of Sutton and all lands and tenements from me, Richard Cook. So there he actually is claiming that he has part of the right to the manor of Sutton, and that ties us back to what Lissons was talking about, which was the Cook family, or Richard Cock in Lissons' text there. Well, that's all well and good, but the family tree goes on and on and on, and I think what I'll just do is to end now by going back to Alice's will. We know there is... Oh no! Before I do that, before that, I want to mention something else within Richard's will. I talk about the chap Thomas Plastow and Agnes, his wife, that they should have a tenement in Sutton called Gaddis, and this is in Richard Cook the Elder's will, and this is a will of 1494. So you have mention of him. That goes back to Alice Steward, who of course was allocating Gaddis to one of her sons. So there's some sort of tie-in. But remember that this William Plastow, who is probably the father or grandfather of Thomas Plastow, more likely to be the father of Thomas Plastow, was only given one sheep by Alice. So somehow, in all of that, Richard Cook has managed to get hold of Gaddis and is now reallocating it to the Plastow family. So the Plastow family is on the up. They've got a better property, or they've got property from somebody who's a major player within Sutton. The other thing to notice is that suddenly you have descriptions of families like Compton and Yew, or in the case of Compton and Scowyer, they're described as yeomen. And then you've got this other two people within the will who were called Hugh and John Hugh and Richard Morland, who are described as gentlemen. So they are sufficiently wealthy within this to have a clear social standing, where they are landowners that are gentlemen rather than simply that middle tier of free landowners called yeomen. They have a greater pretension within land ownership. And that's the Morland family is obviously the family, the descendants of Hugh and Henry, that was mentioned in William Morland's will, just 2 years older. So Hugh and Henry, somehow you've got this other Richard Morland who has come in, and probably a brother or some other kinsman of Hugh as well. What I want to end with is the longevity of names. So we've got Steward as this main name, and obviously Steward, the variants of spelling. Well, we meet Steward as a family. we see this in 1483. We can follow the name of Steward right the way through to the 1600s. Now we know this because in the early 1600s there was a descendant of Alice Steward called Daniel Steward, with the rank of yeoman. So this was a prosperous thing, and the poor vicar of Sutton, Robert Caudle, had to take Daniel Steward to court, and it went all the way up to the Star Chamber after quarter sessions in Kingston, all the way up, to stop him singing songs which were offensive. So he had reference to, "Hey, down a down, go down a down, this was Hollery Cole of Carshalton town." So it also indicates that Carshalton had a greater status than Sutton because it's a town. But he also sang songs like "The Parson of Sutton loves last mutton, venison is so lean. He was burnt with a whore, and therefore he swore that he would come no more there." Which doesn't really quite scan, but singing dirty songs about his wife, because essentially Robert Caudle was the first married priest of Sutton, and saying that Robert Caudle was burnt with a whore indicates that there was some difficulties with accepting married priests within Sutton, even at the end of Elizabeth's reign, Queen Elizabeth's reign. But you've still got this whole point that the family of Steward is there. So I'd be really interesting to know, do we still have families in Sutton who are stewards that actually have deep root? Do we have families in Sutton that are cooks and have deep roots? Do we have Morlands in Sutton? Now, I know that the Morland family has started to drift into sort of Banstead and things, but I want to know do we have anybody with those links, because that'd be really, really interesting. Now, if you do want to know more, I'm coming to the end of my ramble here. Do watch other rambles that are on the YouTube channel. Any of the topics that I've touched on, please do go and have a look at the resources that are up on Sutton College's website. Register, and by resources I mean go and join a class, go and take part in that. We have been going through a whole lot of things today, and I hope that that's been enjoyable with you. I'm going to finish off now. So thank you very much for listening. Your history, Sutton.